Hi, Colleen. Welcome to Coffee Conversations. I'm so glad that you were willing to give me this time and talk to me. Colleen Bozard, you're with CC Bozard Consulting and have been running your own consulting firm for some time. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do, especially in and around interim director positions.
Sure. Hey, Jenny, I'm really glad to be with you today. I've been doing my consulting work for a number of years, as you said, since I think 1998, maybe.
Yay.
And I really first started out in an interim transitional role for an organization that was looking for their first paid director, but wasn't really ready yet for that.
Okay.
And so I started off doing interim work, and my consulting business has focused on helping with interim leadership issues, helping with searches, helping do being an interim director, as well as I also, as you know, focus on board governance, helping boards be better and stronger at what they do, and then strategic planning stuff as well.
Excellent. So a
Yeah,
lot of experience. So this
yeah,
is exciting because I get to hear all about how an interim director can contribute to the transition with a smaller nonprofit who may not see this as being an affordable option during a transition.
yeah,
So talk to me a little bit about your service as an interim director and what that can look like for an organization.
yeah. I'd love to. And I guess what if an organization is looking for an interim director, the one thing that a good strong interim will bring to the organization is they will be a really highly skilled change manager who's going to be able to help the board and the staff make the transition. I mean, they in essence are kind of taking the helm of the organization, keeping things moving along, making sure, the bills are being paid and the services are being provided, while also at the same time helping the organization move from the one leader to the next. And making
Mhm.
that transition successfully is really going to be important as to whether or not the next executive director or chief executive is going to be successful.
Okay, that's a really, it's interesting because I don't think that boards oftentimes realize just the sheer quantity of work that goes on behind the scenes that an executive director manages, just moving all those little pieces around. And so
Right.
an interim director can offer that sort of stability during a transition and making sure those pieces go off without issue. And then added benefit that you didn't even get from your previous executive
That's right.
director is being able to assess where the organization is and help determine about whether or not there need to be um, uh, or whether or not you can help that organization manage the change that they're facing and how you can do that and how you can implement that with the support of the board. Is that
Jenny,
kind of what you're thinking?
I think one of the things I see that boards really, one of the biggest mistakes I guess they make is that it's a real scary time for the board and the staff when an executive director leaves, whether it's a
Yeah.
planned departure or a sudden one. And so they have a tendency to rush forward, oh, quick,
Yeah.
we got to bring somebody else in. And I think one of the best things about bringing on an interim is that you can make sure that things are moving along and all the myriad things that need to happen as a director happen, but it also allows the board to kind of step back and really think about the future of the organization. I think I always tell organizations there are a couple of things they should expect from their interim. The first thing is that an interim director, if they're worth their salt, are going to help the organization take a really honest look at
Mhm.
their strengths and their weaknesses. What historically, what are they always doing well? But maybe some historically, what are some problems that you've had ongoing for a long time? This interim director comes in kind of with an unbiased viewpoint and
Yeah.
can say, here, hey, here's some underlying issues that really need to be looked at before you can bring a new leader on. They also really can help you think about the future. So one of the things I see boards do is when they're rushing forward to bring on somebody quickly is that they pull out the job description and say, okay, this is who we're going to look for, right?
Yeah.
Instead of stepping back, being real strategic in how they go about this and thinking about, okay, so our executive director brought us to this point, but where do we want to go now? And what
Yeah.
kind of person is it going to take to help us get to that place? And then really be thinking about those are the skills, those are the areas of expertise that we need in our next director. Not saying that our past director wasn't good, but now we need somebody to take us the next step forward. So really kind of looking at the identity and the direction of the organization. And the other thing is, it, as I said, it's a real scary time, right? For the board. It's
Yeah.
also a really scary time for the staff. And so
Even
when you
more
bring it,
so.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, because they don't know what's happening. They
Yeah.
worry about their jobs. Always the rumor mill's kind of
Mhm.
flowing. What I heard this, what about that? And if you bring in an interim, they can really help stabilize that. They can make sure the communication is flowing so staff knows what's going on. They can try to help alleviate some of those worries and those concerns. They can also tap into the staff creativity because,
Okay.
going through a change like this really kind of opens up the doors about what could be. So
Yeah.
let's think about, are there changes that we could be trying out, things that we have always dreamed of doing but just never had the time, or the leadership didn't have the inclination? Let's try it out. I mean, you don't want things to get too disruptive. Obviously, you don't want to turn things upside down, but you can be real creative during this transition time, and an interim can help kind of facilitate that along.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and that's interesting because really you're helping to identify if there are some gaps and some
Yeah.
opportunities, and then to be able to affect those, at least in conversations that you're having with board, whether it happened at the interim level or if it happens later on when the new executive director is coming on, because you're going to be able
Yeah.
to give her some guidance as to, I used her there. Do you like that? Her
Yeah.
some guidance as to how to proceed
Yep.
and moving forward with taking on this new role in this organization.
It really alleviates a lot of those first couple of months of kind of figuring things out. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm doing it right now, helping an organization. This morning, I spent time creating a whole list of, here are the things you need to know, here are the people you need to know, but also here are some of the issues going on in the organization. This particular staff person is concerned about this. I've seen this kind of thing going on with the board, so that they come in, they can hit the ground running. And
Oh,
it's so much more.
amazing. What a
And because
gift.
and because the board has spent the time that's needed, they brought the right person in too,
Yeah.
so that
Yes.
I've seen way too many times where the board, when they don't take the time that's needed, they don't necessarily bring in the right person.
Yes.
And you and
And
I know, you and I had some experience with this, right? Where we went, because you were the board chair of a statewide organization where I was the interim for an organization. And I remember we went through the search process 3 times just to
yes.
make sure that we brought the right person on. And boy, did we do a great job, because she's still there 10 years later. So,
Yes,
and
and
she's been
doing an
phenomenal. Thanks.
amazing work. And
Yeah.
I think it is, I mean, the inclination, right, for a board member is, I can't possibly do this. I have my own full-time job. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
just like, we've got to get somebody in there, and forgetting about that public trust that they're required to
Mm,
uphold, and kind of
yeah.
just being like, no, this is really more about us and what we need to do to get people in place, and really having good intentions, but it can be so bad and so costly, much even more than financial, but just, culturally
Yep. Think
overall
about
for
the
an
long term. I
organization.
mean, think about the relationships you have with your stakeholders and your funders. And when
Yeah.
things aren't going well and they see you falter over and over again, that really ultimately really harms the organization. So do it right the first time, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
yeah.
an excellent point. I wish more would heed. I think a lot of the smaller nonprofits don't consider having an interim director. They're resistant to that. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe we can help them overcome that hurdle because they just don't see it being there?
Well, I think there's probably a couple of reasons around that, Jenny. One of them might be, that scary thing about just wanting to move forward quickly.
Yeah,
But I think a lot of it has to do with they're afraid of the cost. Honestly, they think they
okay,
can't afford it. They think bringing in this outside person is going to be so costly. And they don't have the budget. It's not in the budget. What they don't think about are relating to cost is, one, they're not paying their executive director anymore. They're probably bringing somebody in on a contractual basis, so they're not paying for benefits, they're not paying taxes. So it's not going to be something new that's coming out of the budget. It's just going to be a different budget line item. But then also, there are, I guess, as we said, there's costs they don't think about, the
yeah,
long-term impact. And when they don't bring on the right person, and I have seen this, as we said, they don't bring in the right person. And so a year later, because they've rushed so fast and they didn't bring in the interim, now they're having to go through the search again.
yeah.
And so, but I think the smaller ones, it's mostly, I think it's a financial issue,
And maybe
honestly.
just a lack of awareness that there's that
Sure.
options on the table for an organization of their size. I know that had I not known you and the experiences that I'd had with you and working with you, I probably wouldn't have known that either when I transitioned away from the nonprofit that I was running and made that recommendation to the board. Because it's not, if it's not in your face, you just don't realize that that's really a
Yes.
kind of a goal that can be obtained easily. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes also some of the smaller organizations have working boards per
Yeah.
se, so where
Mhm.
the board members are both governing and doing a lot more work in what the
Yeah.
organization does. And so they think they can jump in and do the work as well. But it really helps, I think, to have that outside unbiased perspective as you're coming in. And
And
plus, usually they have jobs, or
right.
lives that,
They have lives even
yes,
more so now, right?
yes,
Everybody's so stretched so thin.
yeah,
And here's the other piece. Colleen, you are a highly experienced executive director. Like you can walk into a place and immediately be able to understand the dynamics of what's going on, what you need to do to be able to assess kind of what's our next steps for that group. I can't think of a whole lot of board chairs that are going to have that ability.
that's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
that's
mean,
true.
great, board chairs are fabulous, but that's not what they're there for.
That's
And
right.
we shouldn't have that expectation. And they should not be getting into that because that's
No.
dangerous.
No, and we need them to be the chair. We need a board chair to provide leadership
You
to the board through
do.
this process.
You do.
Absolutely.
And I
And
think when board chairs start losing that anyway, when board chairs or boards start losing that anyway, it becomes an
mhm,
issue otherwise. Like then
yeah,
you start getting issues of drifting over into the executive's
sure do.
role and conflicts arise. And that can trickle down later in with the
Yep.
new executive director, right?
So why not bring in a staff person? Then I asked, why can't I have
Yeah.
my second in command come in? And for the same reason, the second in command or whoever it is has a job to do that's really important.
Yeah.
They might want to apply for the job. And so then there's some issues around, can you really be unbiased in the search process?
It's
I
great.
mean, there's I think really bringing in, if an organization is looking for an interim director, they really need to look for somebody who's really skilled at this change management kind of stuff, who
Right.
really understands the dynamics of moving an organization from point A to point B. And I
Exactly.
mean, as you said, they really need to know about have experience, I guess, running an organization. Nonprofit organization would be better because really, I think that knowing what a board of directors is supposed to do, expectations of various staff members, how the financial nonprofit accounting systems go, how the fundraising systems are, all of those
Yeah.
things, really understanding, having that experience is really helpful. Um,
Oh, key,
yeah, yeah,
integral. I don't even
yeah.
think that that's negotiable, in my
Uh,
opinion. I don't think it's
Yeah, but I
negotiable.
think it's that change management piece that's really important
Okay.
because people who can help, I mean, because there's a lot of they have to be really approachable. They have to be able to build trust really quickly because if you're going to help
Yeah,
the staff through the process, they have to learn to trust you pretty quickly. They have to be
true.
really good communicators and they have to be really well organized because you're stepping in and you have to really take an assessment within a month or 6 weeks of the status to help the place going forward. Because one of the things I have found is, you know, you and I know executive directors do a lot of work. They do
Yeah.
so much, and so much of it ends up being up
I
here, and
know.
they don't write it down. And so when somebody new's coming in, I don't know how the payroll system goes. They just did it, or I don't
Right.
know who all these things that you have to go in and be able to figure this stuff out really quickly. So it's got to be
Right.
somebody who's good at multitasking and being real organized as well.
Okay. That's one of the things I do is I help with onboarding new executive directors and they'll say, oh, so what are you working on? Well, who knows today? Somebody just walked in and said, I have to do
Yes.
XYZ and I had no idea. And I don't know where you
Yes.
get that document. And it's like, that's where an interim can be just so integral and
Yeah.
setting them up for success. That's such a gift. Can you tell me a little bit about in your relationship with the board and what that looks like when you're working as an interim, how you, and maybe take it even one step further, how do boards go about finding interim directors,
Yeah.
qualified, actually experienced, because anybody can say they do this, by the way.
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about that and then the
Sure.
relationship you establish.
So my relationship with the board is I'm really upfront with them right away that it's going to take more work. than they normally do. But because they've got me, it's going to be very focused, because we know boards are really concerned about, the time that they use, that it's really impactful and effective, and they're using their time well.
Yeah.
So, we talk about here are the expectations of what we have of the board. This is the kind of, I have to be real upfront about the communication styles. I need to be able to access you pretty quickly. How can I do that? But I won't bug you to, how do you like to communicate, kind of stuff. And so I think it's real important to do that right up front, to set out the expectations of communication and roles and responsibilities. In terms of where you find a good interim, and that's a great question. I think I would recommend to some folks, maybe the first place to go look is at your state nonprofit association,
Okay.
because they often have business folks, people who support nonprofits that they may be including the interim. And then I know you and I both have kind of connected with, there are organizations out there that's what they do. They're kind of like this for-profit CEO headhunters, but they also do it for interim directors. And that's an easy Google search away. But I think it would be thinking ahead of time about, what are the things that you think that you need from the organization or from the interim director. One thing I would say is it's not necessarily important that they be a topical expert or an expert in your field, because I've been the interim for a homeless program, for a sexual assault program, for a maternal health program, to the ACLU. I mean, a whole spectrum. It doesn't matter that I'm not the expert in whatever the field is that nonprofit is, because what's more important is that I'm an expert in operations.
Excellent point.
And how that moves forward.
Yeah.
You've got other people who know your field of expertise. So you can do without that for 6 months. So
yeah, nonprofit management, what a key. Well,
yeah.
And it's a good opportunity to be able to kind of help funnel some of that out to some staff who may have not had the opportunity to really develop some of those skills, because the executive director who's previous was able to do it all. Right. And so then you can farm that out and help them develop in new skill areas, and it can actually be really beneficial to them in certain ways. So I appreciate you talking to me today. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I just, really, I highly, highly, highly recommend that folks consider bringing in an interim executive director if you know that you're going to go through a transition pretty soon, as well as if you find yourself in the middle of one. And also that how important succession planning is, that as an organization, you create a succession plan so that you're not caught off guard, that you're prepared when that happens.
Right. And you have a resource already in order. I had Greg Nielsen on with Coffee Conversations. We were talking a little bit about strategic planning during a crisis, and he was talking a lot about how he's seeing a trend towards succession planning and succession planning. And after all this time, we've been begging our clients to do this. They're finally thinking about it because they have to, because we've got so much turnover happening right now in the nonprofit leadership realm.
I think I just heard, I was just in another meeting right before this, where they were going over some findings of a national study that said, I think only 45% of executive directors are satisfied in their job right now. So
number one, it's just a hard job. Right? I mean, and it doesn't get a whole lot of accolades. But then the second component of that is they're expected to do so much with so little, and then now we have a pandemic. Here we're just gonna let's just add that right in. Oh, and we're gonna cut some federal funding like a mug. So people are really feeling the stress. And you know what? If I was an executive director looking at this, and this was about time for retirement, maybe a year or two early, I might say, I might wrap this up early now. And I think that's what we see happening. So it is a good time for that. And so what a timely opportunity to consider what an interim could look like for your organization. Going ahead and finding an organization that has a resource list for interim directors, and maybe even talking to some of them about having that relationship down the line and being potentially being an interim for
at least be talking about what's important to you in terms of the interim leader that you need.
It's good. Yeah, that's
have those conversations.
I thought there was one more thing I want to talk. Oh, so before we go, I did want to ask you, when you're looking at interims, and you said, helping to to determine what you're going to want from that interim to do for the organization. But are there specific keywords or things you should be looking for? Like, say I'm a board member, I have no knowledge about nonprofit. I've been running this, I've only been the board chair for 6 months. I've only been on the organization for 3 years. I really don't know a whole lot about what that executive director did, and she was just doing a great job. And now I've got to find an interim. What are some things this interim should be saying to me to make me have confidence that they're going to do a good job?
That they understand and know about financial systems so that they can jump in right away. Whether you use an outside accountant or bookkeeper, whether it's done internally, you need to know that somebody's got a strong, close eye on how the money's being spent budget wise. So that financial management, somebody who knows people, personnel. They don't have to be experts in HR, but they need to know people. And honestly, somebody who has experience in this change management, who it might be somebody who's been an interim before. It might be somebody who's taken an organization themselves, for example, I knew a group where they went from a local organization to a statewide organization. That's a huge transition. So be looking for those kinds of transitions that were successful. Really,
Yeah,
I would
those are
take
good.
those 3 things. Yeah,
That's good. That's key. Because I mean, you could have been with an organization for a few years. It was very stable and you helped maintain it. But being able to do, again, you said that change management piece is so integral to
really
an
is.
interim's role.
It
Good.
really is. Yeah.
Thank you for meeting with me,
Oh, this has
Colleen.
been fun,
And at the
Jenny.
end of this, we'll be providing your website and pointing people in that direction. And I
Terrific.
just really appreciate you coming and talking to me. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
I do too. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Bye.